My family disowned me at 18, but 5 years later they reached out not to reconcile, but to demand I hand over my hard-earned business to my golden child sister. I refused, and then things took a messy turn. Hey Reddit, I don't even know where to start, so I'll just jump to the story. When I 23 male turned 18, my parents sat me down for the talk. They told me they couldn't handle the burden of raising two kids anymore. At the time, I had no idea what they meant, but then it became clear. My younger sister, Emily, now 20 female, had always been the golden child. She was the one they showered with attention, compliments, and gifts. I never really fit into that mold. No matter how hard I tried, I was always in the background, never quite good enough. Growing up, it was always Emily who got the best grades, who made them proud with her achievements, who got all the support. She was the one who could do no wrong. I was the problem child, the one they constantly compared to her. Why can't you be more like Emily? I always knew she was the favorite, and they never tried to hide it. Her mistakes were brushed off, but mine were amplified. If I got a B in a class, I'd hear about it for weeks. If Emily got a B, it was okay, sweetie, next time try harder. But when it came time for me to leave for college, they acted like it was my final act of rebellion. They didn't help with anything, no financial support, no guidance, no encouragement. It was like I was being abandoned the moment I was legally old enough to be on my own. So when I turned 18, my parents just cut ties. There was no big conversation, no explanation. They just told me that I was on my own now and that they couldn't afford to support two children anymore. Emily, of course, was still their pride and joy, so she got all the attention. She got the trips, the new clothes, the endless support. Meanwhile, I was forced to figure everything out by myself, without so much as a phone call from them. I was kicked out with nothing, not even a simple good luck or we hope you do well. It was like I no longer existed to them. It was a hard pill to swallow, and for a while, I questioned what was wrong with me. But over time, I had to accept that my parents' love wasn't something I could ever earn. It was always reserved for Emily, no matter what. It was rough. I had nowhere to turn, so I ended up sleeping in my car for a while. I remember those nights lying awake in the back seat, shivering from the cold, staring up at the stars, trying to convince myself that I was going to be okay. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I couldn't give up. I worked crappy jobs just to survive anything I could get my hands on. I'd wake up early, work long hours at fast food restaurants or retail stores, and then crash in my car, hoping tomorrow would be better. There were days when I didn't know how I was going to make it to the next paycheck, let alone get ahead in life. But I didn't let myself stay stuck. I had to claw my way up, little by little. I took every odd job that came my way. I'd deliver pizzas, work construction, or even clean houses, whatever paid. And on the side, I started learning about business. I read books, watched free tutorials, and asked anyone I could who seemed to know more than me. It wasn't glamorous, and it sure wasn't easy, but I had one goal in mind: to build something that was mine, something I could be proud of. Eventually, I saved up enough to rent a tiny space to start my business. It wasn't much, just a small office with second-hand furniture and a barely functioning computer. But it was mine. I remember the first few months being terrifying. Every sale was a victory, and every failure felt like a massive setback. I would work 12-hour days, 7 days a week, trying to get clients, build my brand, and learn the ropes. I had no one to turn to for help, no family, no friends with connections, just my determination to make it work. There were plenty of nights where I ate cheap ramen and stared at my bank account, praying I could make payroll or pay the bills. I didn't have a safety net, no one to bail me out if things went south. But I pushed through because I had no other choice. I couldn't fail, not after everything I'd been through. Over the years, things started to change. Slowly but surely, the business grew. I made better connections, learned from my mistakes, and refined my craft. I expanded my offerings, found a loyal client base, and hired a small team of people who were just as passionate as I was. After years of blood, sweat, and tears, my business finally became successful. I'm not filthy rich, but I'm comfortable. I can pay my bills, I can take a vacation when I need it, and I have peace of mind knowing I built this from nothing. I'm proud of what I've built, and I don't take any of it for granted. It wasn't just about the money, it was about proving to myself that I could make it without anyone's help, that I could rise from the ashes of the way my family treated me. This business is my redemption, my reward for never giving up, even when it felt like the world was against me. Every struggle, every failure, every tear, it all led to this moment, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished on my own. Fast forward to last week, and out of nowhere, my parents reached out. I was honestly shocked to hear from them. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, and not a single word since they disowned me on my 18th birthday. I didn't even know how they got my number again. I figured maybe they had a change of heart, or they wanted to apologize for everything that had happened. Maybe they were finally ready to reconnect after all these years. But no, when I picked up the phone, it was clear this wasn't about reconciliation. They didn't waste any time getting to the point. Apparently, Emily had failed out of college. I wasn't surprised. Honestly, she'd always coasted through life with little effort and still got all the praise and attention. But now, my parents were acting like the world was ending. They went on and on about how hard life had been for her, how she was struggling, and how it's not her fault. They kept repeating that she just needed a little more time to find herself and that she was overwhelmed. There was no mention of any responsibility on her part, no maybe you should work harder, just a lot of hand-wringing about how tough things were for her and how they wished they could do more. But then came the bombshell. They expected me to give Emily my business. I couldn't believe it. They actually had the audacity to ask me for my hard-earned business, the one I had built from scratch, just because Emily was struggling. They said it was the right thing to do for family to help each other out, and that she was more deserving than I was. Apparently, all my blood, sweat, and tears meant nothing. They just thought that, since I had found some success, I should hand it over to her. The argument was that she was still finding herself and that I had already had my chance at success. They kept saying it was family and I was being selfish for not sharing what I had built. They even went as far as to tell me that if I didn't help her, I was just as bad as the people who had abandoned me. They said that family always comes first, that I needed to be the bigger person, and that I had no right to keep my business to myself when Emily needed it more. It honestly felt like they were trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty for something I had worked so hard for. I was taken aback, to say the least. It's like they completely erased the last 5 years of my life, 5 years of pain, struggle, and rejection just because now they needed something from me. I had to sit there and listen to all of this, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After 5 years of silence, this was their idea of reaching out to me. It felt like a slap in the face. They didn't care about me or what I went through. They just saw an opportunity, and it was too much for me to ignore. I laughed when they first brought it up because I honestly thought it was some kind of twisted joke. I mean, who calls up the child they disowned 5 years ago and demands their business? But no, they were completely dead serious. My parents argued that Emily had more potential than I ever did and just needed a head start. They claimed that she was at a disadvantage, because life hadn't gone the way she planned, and it was my responsibility to step in and fix it. They even had the nerve to imply that it was the least I could do after all the years they raised me. That was the part that made my blood boil. The least they could do, really. They kicked me out with nothing the moment I became an adult, leaving me to fend for myself while they poured all their time, money, and energy into Emily. And now they're sitting here trying to take credit for my success, acting like they played any role in it. I couldn't believe their audacity. I told them absolutely not. I didn't sugarcoat it. I made it crystal clear that I built this business from scratch, with zero help from anyone, and I owed them nothing. I reminded them that they disowned me the moment I turned 18, that they didn't lift a finger to help me when I was struggling, and that I had to claw my way out of rock bottom on my own. I told them that if anyone deserved a head start, it was me 5 years ago, and they turned their backs on me. Why should I be expected to bail out Emily now? That's when they turned on me. They called me ungrateful and accused me of holding a grudge over something I should have gotten over by now. They made it sound like I was the problem, like I was being petty for not wanting to hand over the thing I worked my entire adult life to build. They tried to guilt-trip me, saying, family helps family, and how I was being selfish for putting myself before Emily. They even said it was my duty as her older brother to set her up for success. I didn't let them get to me. I calmly told them that their version of family only seems to apply when they want something from me, and I wasn't going to entertain it anymore. Then I hung up. Since then, the fallout has been ridiculous. My parents have been spreading the story to our extended family, twisting it to make me look like the bad guy. I've been getting bombarded with messages from relatives telling me I'm selfish, heartless, and cruel for refusing to share my blessings. Some of them are even accusing me of abandoning my sister, saying she's struggling to find herself and that I'm in a position to help, so why wouldn't I? What infuriates me most is how they've conveniently left out the part where they disowned me and left me homeless at 18. No one seems to care about that part. They're all acting like I'm some entitled jerk who refuses to give Emily a helping hand, instead of the person who had to scrape and suffer to get to where I am today. It's like my struggles don't matter because, in their eyes, Emily has always been the one who deserved everything. It's honestly exhausting. I've been ignoring most of the messages, but every now and then, one slips through that makes me question myself. Am I being too harsh? Should I feel guilty for saying no? But then I remember everything I've been through, and I know in my heart that I made the right decision. This is my life, my success, and I won't let them take it away just because now it's convenient for them to call me family. Update. So, I thought ignoring the drama would make it die down. I figured my family would realize I wasn't going to cave and eventually leave me alone. Boy, was I wrong. A couple of days ago, my parents somehow found out where I live and the location of my business. I have no idea how, maybe through a distant relative or someone snooping on social media. Either way, they showed up in person to my office while I wasn't there, and things got ugly. From what my staff told me, my parents and Emily stormed into the building demanding to see me. When my receptionist politely told them I wasn't in, they started yelling, saying it was their business and they had a right to be there. My staff tried to explain that I wasn't on site and that they needed to leave, but my parents wouldn't back down. Instead, they started causing a scene, shouting that I was abandoning my family in need and how I was selfish for not giving Emily what was rightfully hers. Apparently, Emily was crying and saying how unfair it was that her brother was living the good life while she was stuck at home struggling. My parents doubled down, claiming that I owed them for raising me and that I had no right to deny them access to the business because it was built with the foundation of the values they gave me. What values? The value of being discarded when I wasn't convenient anymore. Things escalated when they tried to force their way past the front desk into my private office. My staff told them repeatedly to leave, but they wouldn't listen. At one point, my dad started banging on the walls, yelling that they weren't leaving until they got what they came for. They even accused my staff of stealing from them by keeping them out of their property. It got so bad that my staff had to call the police. I wasn't there when this happened. I was out meeting a client, but I got a frantic phone call from my manager explaining the situation. By the time I got back to the office, the police were already there. My parents were outside, still yelling, and my mom was crying to the officers about how I was a terrible son who had abandoned my family in their time of need. Emily just sat there sulking, acting like she was the victim in all of this. The police eventually got them to leave, but not before my parents made a huge scene in front of my employees and a few clients who happened to be there. They kept shouting that they'd be back and that I couldn't keep ignoring them forever. It was humiliating, to say the least. Now, I'm scrambling to figure out how they even found me in the first place, and I'm considering tightening security at both my office and my home. I've already told my staff to call the police immediately if they show up again. I feel like my entire world has been flipped upside down. I worked so hard to create a life of stability and peace, and now my parents are trying to tear it all apart because they see me as their ticket out of their own mess. It's like they don't even see me as a person, just a resource that they can use whenever they feel like it. Update 2. It gets even worse. I wish I could say the drama ended after the incident at my office, but unfortunately, it didn't. Somehow, my parents also managed to find out where I live. I suspect a nosy relative must have leaked the information, but I can't be sure. Either way, they showed up at my apartment unannounced a few days later, and the scene they caused was nothing short of chaotic. It was late in the evening when I heard loud banging on my door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw my parents and Emily standing there, looking furious. I didn't want to deal with them, so I refused to open the door. That didn't stop them. They kept banging and shouting, demanding that I let them in. My mom was yelling about how I was a horrible son for ignoring them, and my dad was screaming that I needed to step up and do my duty for the family. Emily, of course, was crying and whining about how I was ruining her life by being selfish. When I didn't respond, they took things further. My dad started pounding on the door so hard that I thought it might break, and my mom began yelling loud enough for the whole building to hear about how I had stolen the family's rightful success and how I was abandoning my sister. In her time of need, a few neighbors came out to see what was going on, and it was beyond embarrassing. Eventually, I had no choice but to call the police again. By the time the officers arrived, my parents were shouting about how I had locked them out of their property. Yes, you read that right, they were claiming my apartment was theirs. My mom went into full-on theatrics, crying to the officers about how I had changed and was now refusing to support my family. Emily chimed in, accusing me of being heartless and turning my back on them when they needed me most. The police told them to leave, but not before my dad threatened to take legal action if I didn't do the right thing and give them what they believed they were entitled to. I thought it was an empty threat, but I underestimated just how far they were willing to go. The very next week, I was served with legal documents. My parents had filed a lawsuit claiming partial ownership of my business. They were arguing that because they had raised me and instilled the values that led to my success, they were entitled to a share of it. They even included Emily as a co-claimant, saying she was more deserving of running the business and needed it to get her life back on track. At this point, I was absolutely livid. They had already humiliated me at my office and my home, and now they were trying to take away everything I had worked so hard for. I immediately hired a lawyer to fight the lawsuit, and thankfully, it was dismissed pretty quickly because they had no actual claim. Still, the entire process was stressful, expensive, and emotionally draining. After the lawsuit, I realized I couldn't let this continue. My parents and Emily clearly weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted, so I took the next step. I filed for a restraining order. I provided all the evidence of their harassment, the incidents at my office, the scene at my apartment, the lawsuit, and even the threatening messages they had sent me since this all started. The court granted the restraining order, which means they're no longer allowed to come near me, my home, or my business. It's been a few weeks since the restraining order was put in place, and things have finally started to calm down. But I can't shake the anger and disappointment I feel. These people are supposed to be my family, and instead of supporting me, they've spent the last few months trying to tear me down and take everything I've built.